Hello and welcome back to Humanizer, where I'm converting the free and open source MakeHuman plugin from Blender to Godot 4. So, as you can see, I finished optimizing the clothing by pre-calculating the blend shapes for the mesh, and it now fits the human and still works with the animations. So I also added a second set of clothing, and they have eyes now, so that's good. And next time I'll be working on a character creator menu that you can actually run in game. This closed demo is just through the editor, and you change the variables, and you can find that in the closed gen folder. So I'll put a link to this project in the description, and now I'll show you how I optimized the clothing. As you can see, once I removed the helper geometries from the base mesh, the clothing builder is no longer working. So I need to make a new scene to pre-calculate the Blender shape keys instead of having to triangulate from the helper geometries every time it changes. So I'll make a new 3D scene to generate the clothes mesh and save this in the closed gen folder. Then I'll attach a new built-in script and add an export variable for the clothes name. So this will be the folder name from the Blender plugin. For example, female casual suit 2. And I'll just take the folder name without the entire path. So now I want to load the mesh.resource from here, but I'll quickly show you how I exported this from Blender with all of the other files that you'll need. So it's pretty easy. So to add a new clothing option to the generator, you'll want to navigate to your Blender config latest version and then MPFB data folder. This will contain all of the equipable assets. So you'll want to decide on a folder to import. I'll go ahead and use the male elegant suit. So I'll copy that and move it to the Humanizer closed gen folder. And I'll probably reorganize this at some point, but for now this works. So the clothing folder has a mhclothing file in it, which contains the information to triangulate the vertices for the mesh. So for each vertex in the clothing mesh, we have 3 indexes and then 3 corresponding weights that add up to 1, and then an offset at the end. So that's how we'll build the shape key file. There's also a MakeHuman material file, which you could manually transfer over the values to make the material, and an object, which we won't use, and a thumbnail, which you could use in the character creator or inventory. And then we have the base mesh for the outfit. So, and you could also just copy these directly from the Make Human System Assets zip folder that you get on the makehumancommunity.org/assets asset packs. So there's quite a few assets, and most of them I believe are Creative Commons, so there's quite a few to choose from. But you will have to import them from Blender as well, so they do have to be installed regardless if you copy it from the zip or not. Now in a new Blender project, I'll make a new human with the MPFB plugin from scratch. And under the Data tab, you'll want to disable all of the shape keys so that you're left with the basis transform. And now you can, under rigging, add the Mixamo rig. So now the skeleton is attached. And finally, under apply assets, you can find the correct library. And so here is the male elegant suit. So I'll load that. And now you can see that it is equipped to the model. So I'll go ahead and save that in the male elegant suit folder that I just made. Doesn't matter what you call this, since it won't be automated, but I'll save it as close.blend. So make sure it is a blend file, and then I'll let that re-import in Godot. Once it's done importing, double click on the close.blend file to open up the advanced import settings, and click on the elegant suit with the white box. Then enable save to file and set the path to the close folder that I just made, and set the name to import mesh.resource. So save and re-import. And this will generate the import mesh.resource. So if I drag this in, you can see we have the suit, and without any of the shape keys or the material. Now in the ready function, I'll set the folder to the closegen and set the mesh to load the folder plus clothes name plus import mesh.resource. And then I'll get the service arrays from the mesh surface get arrays on surface 0, and then I'll make a new mesh equal to array mesh.new, and I'll add surface from arrays using the primitive triangles, and I'll just pass the surface arrays for now, but we'll add the blend arrays after this. And then I'll just use the resource saver to save the new mesh to the folder plus mesh.resource. And I'll change the export variable value to the male elegant suit. So you can do that through the editor on the side or just change it there. So this will be male elegant suit 1. So I'll paste that in the close name and then run the generate close mesh. So it saved it in the wrong place because I didn't add the clothes name plus /mesh. Okay, so now I'll run that again. And now it's generated the mesh resource in the elegant suit folder. And as you can see, it's the same model and we have no blend shapes or material. Now I want to remove the tangent and normals because I'll be regenerating the shading for each blend shape anyway, and it'll just make it easier to generate the shape keys. So I'll set the service arrays at array normal and array tangent equal to null, and just run it again. So now you can see the generated mesh has no shading, but it still has the same shape. Now I want to loop over the shape keys, so first I'll have to load the shape key data.json from the generate mesh. So I also want to convert all of the arrays into vector 3s like I did in the skeleton builder. So I'll go ahead and copy this function, change it to load shape key data, and I'll drag in the shape key data file path. So this loops over all of the arrays in the data.basis dictionary, or data.basis array, and converts them to vector 3s, and then it loops over the shape keys as well and converts them. So I'll set the shape key data equal to load shape key data, and I'll run that. So this threw an error because this is already an array. I don't need to, or this is already a dictionary, so the iterator will be the index already. So now it doesn't throw any errors. And the shape key data is too big for me to open, but I generated it from the shape key target files that you can find in the Blender config. So it just contains all of the shape key, index, and values for all of them compiled into a single JSON file. Now I want to loop over the shape key names in shape key data .shapekeys, and I want to process the shape key for the shape name. So I'll open up the import shape keys for the human mesh, and here I have the process shape key. So first I'll add the new mesh to the, I'll add the shape name to the new mesh as a new blend shape. So I need to make the new mesh accessible, and then I'll get the vertex array equal to service arrays at mesh array vertex, and make a new variable for that as well. So now in the process shape key, I'll get the shape data from the shape keys at shape name and make a new array for the shape, and I'll resize it to the mesh.array max since it needs to be in the same format as the regular surface array. And then I'll set the array vertex to the vertex array dot duplicate because we don't want to overwrite anything. And this is where I'll calculate the position of the coordinates, but for now I'll just comment that out. Then I'll make a new variable for the blend arrays equal to an empty array, and I also need to set the blend shape mode to normalized. So this should be set blend shape mode, and then I'll add the blend arrays as an argument to the add surface from arrays. So now if I run this again, you can see that the blend shape names have all been added to the export mesh, where there's none on the import mesh, and they don't actually do anything yet because I still have to calculate the vertex array. So I'll go ahead and do that. So I need to get the data from the MH clothing file with the indexes, weights, and offsets. And I already have a MH clothing reader class, which has an enumerator for the section, so it only gets the data from the vertices section. And here I was converting from the Blender index to the Godot index, but now since I'm using the shape key data, which I preserved the original Blender index, I actually don't need to convert that anymore. So I'll get rid of the Blender to Godot index, and then in the generate clothing, I'll make a new MH clothing reader before I loop over the shape names. Set make human clothing equal to mhCloReader.new, and I'll pass the folder plus the clothes name plus a slash plus the clothes name again. As you can see, it has the same name as the folder. And then I'll add the extension. Now I need to loop over the vertex data in the make human clothing file and calculate each point. So I'm already doing this in the make clothes demo scene. So I'll copy the loop. Now, I'm not re-indexing the vertex data, so this will be the Blender index. And I'm not using the close helper, so this will just be the make human close reader. So I'll get the line and set the initial coordinates to 0, then loop over the 3 points, and I'll set the vertex index equal to vertex data at I, and set the weight to vertex data at I plus 3, so that'll be over 3 positions. And then I'll add the, instead of getting the blended vertex position, which loops over all of the shape keys, I only need to get the one shape key. So I'll get shape key data at shape keys at shape name at the vertex index, and these are both the Blender vertex times the weight, and then I'll get the last 3 numbers for the offset and multiply by the scale. This I got from the Mixamo rig file, so I know it's around 0.1. I don't know if that's the exact scale, but it seemed right. So I'll get vdata at 6, 7, and 8 for the offset and add that to the coordinates. And then I'll set the shape array at the vertex array at the, I will need to convert this to the Godot index. So for now, I'll just print the coordinates and let it run. And that was the wrong scene. So if I run the generate close mesh, it throws an error because this is a integer, but the shape key data uses strings. It's just the way that the JSON dictionary stores. So I can just cast that as a string. So now it's printing the coordinates. And once it gets to the earlobe, it says it can't find the index again, but that's because the earlobe doesn't contain most of the vertexes. So what I'll have to do is make a new variable for the string index equals string at vertex index, and then I'll check if the string index is in shape key data at shape name, then add the shape key coordinates. Otherwise, I just want to get the shape key basis at the vertex index. So now I'll run that again. And this time it should run all the way through without error. And I do need to multiply the shape key basis by the weight as well. Now I can't just set the Blender index in the vertex array because the export mesh will throw an error because there won't be enough elements in the vertex array. And that's because when you import from Blender to Godot, it adds duplicate vertices. So I need to convert this to the Godot index. So I'll make a new variable for the clothes Blender to Godot index. And once I get the mesh, then I can set this to the utils, create unique index from the vertex array. So this will be here, and the create unique index is a custom function to loop over the unique values in a dictionary and index it by the value to the index, and then it returns the values array or the dictionary depending on the flag. So this will convert from Blender to Godot. And now I'll get the Godot index array equal to the close B to G index at the Blender index. And then I'll loop over the Godot index in the Godot array. And I'll set the new shape at array vertex at the Godot index equal to the coordinates. So now I'll let this run again. And you can see that the export mesh now has all of the shape keys. So that's pretty cool. Next, I need to add the shading. So initially, I just used the same script that I made to generate the human shading, and I was manually setting the bones and the weights because previously I don't think the surface tool create from was taking those into account. At least when I tested it, it didn't work, which is why I had to do it this way. But then I couldn't set all 8 weights And for the clothing, that's really important. The animations didn't work at all using this workaround. But when I tried the surface tool.create from mesh, it actually kept the bones and weights in the export. So I guess they fixed that, which is good. But now it's a lot easier to make the shaded mesh. So I'll add a new function to make the shaded mesh, and I'll add a new variable at the top equals arrayMesh.new. So I'll set the blend shape mode to normalized on the shaded mesh, and then I'll make a new surface tool equals surface tool.new, and I'll use the create from on the new mesh on surface 0, and then you'll generate the normals and tangents, and I'll set the surface arrays equal to surface tool commit to arrays, and then I'll add the surface to the shaded mesh. I won't add the blend arrays yet. And then I'll use the surface, the resource saver, to save the shaded mesh and call the make shaded mesh function after I add the surface to the new mesh and before I call the resource saver. So now if I run this again, so it's throwing a bunch of errors because the new mesh does not have the shape keys. So if I reset the mesh and clear that and then drag the mesh back, it's not throwing the errors, and you can see that it is now shaded and there are no blend shapes, so we'll need to add those now. So now in the make shaded mesh, after I generate the surface arrays, I want to loop over the shape names in shape key data dot shape keys and call the process blend shape shading function past the shape name. And this will be a string. So I'll use the same function from the generate shading on the human mesh. And this is universal for any, so I'll probably move this into its own class, but for now you get the idea. So first I want to clear the surface tool, and then I'll create from blend shape using the new mesh on surface 0 at shape name, and then I'll generate the normals and tangents, and I need to move the surface tool up. Then I'll make the new surface arrays commit array and add the blend shape name to the shaded mesh. Then make the current blend shape array and resize it to array max, and set the vertex normal and tangent arrays from the commit array. You don't want to have all of the other data in there, or else it'll just throw an error. And then I'll append the current blend shape to the blend arrays. So in the make shaded mesh, I'll want to set the blend arrays equal to a new empty array. And then in the add surface from arrays on the shaded mesh, I'll pass the blend arrays. So now if I run the generate closed mesh, and open up the test file, you can see that the shape keys are now working and all of the shading has been generated. So you can see that it actually changes as the shape keys adjust. So now I need to add the material. So I'll add a new surface material override, new standard material, and this clothing only came with one image. Sometimes they have the normals and the ambient occlusion as well, but the diffuse is just the base texture, so you set it to the albedo. So now you can see, and then I'll save this as material.resource in the elegant suit folder. And you could probably automate this, but I don't really, it's not that much effort to just do it by hand for each outfit. And I'll reset the surface material override so it's back to the white mesh. So now in the generate close mesh, before I call the resource saver, I'll get the material equals load folder plus clothes name plus slash material.trez, and then I'll set the shaded mesh material on surface 0 to the material, and run it again. And now you can see that the mesh has the material already assigned. I don't have the surface material set. So now when you drag it into the scene or equip it, it automatically has the texture. And I haven't really figured out how to manage multiple textures. So like if you wanted a tan suit and a pinstripe suit, you would just make different textures for this and reuse the same model. So I'll figure that out later, but for now, this looks pretty good. Now I can close this and open up the close demo, and I'll set the close mesh to the elegant suit mesh and reset the material override. And the skeleton is already set, so if I reset that, you can see that now it snaps to the skeleton. So now in the script, I don't need to call the makeClose function to calculate the vertices anymore, but I do need to regenerate the skin from rest transforms. So, and I'll ignore the gender changed and get rid of the close helper. So now in the skeleton builder base class, in the update blend shapes function, I'll make a new function to set blend shape value, which will take a shape key ID and a value, and then I'll just call human mesh set blend shape from the shape key ID and the value. So then everywhere that I'm calling set shape key ID or value, I'll call this function instead. And in the close demo, I'll override the set blend shape value function. So I'll call the super first, which is the parent class function, and then I'll call the close set blend value to the shape key ID as well. So now I'll reload the close demo, and now you can see that the shape keys are working. So there is a little bit of clipping on the chest. So in the material resource, I'll set the grow to 0.05. So just increase it by small amounts until you see the clipping is no longer an issue. So that looks good, and the animations still work as well. So I went ahead and imported the female elegant suit. As you can see, the shape keys have been imported with the shading, and this one had the ambient occlusion and normal maps, so I set those in the material as well. So now in the closed demo, on the gender changed, so if the gender is male, set the clothes.mesh equal to load the male elegant suit mesh.resource. Otherwise, if the gender is female, load the female elegant suit 1. So now you can see we have the outfit working, and I need to increase the grow. So that looks better. And now you can change the age. And the outfit adjusts. And you can see that the animation is working for this as well. So I'll go ahead and regenerate the casual outfits as well, and then I'll add a flag. I'll add another boolean to the export variables. So now I'll add the fancy clothes toggle as an export variable, set to true, and I'll override the set function. So first set fancy clothes equal to value, and then I'll call the change clothes function, and I'll go ahead and make that so in gender changed, I'll just call this function as well. So this will check for first if fancy clothes is true, then set it to the suit or the skirt. Otherwise, set it to the male or female casual suit. So now if I update this, you can see when I change the gender, it changes to the casual. And when I enable the fancy clothes, now the female model is in the skirt. So you can see that's all working. So now I want to add the eyes and teeth as well. And I forgot that you also need to set the create skin from rest transforms for the clothes.skin. So if you don't call that at all, you can see when you change the shape keys that it no longer lines up with the skeleton. So I need to call that in the update and when I change clothes. But I don't want to be checking the toggles every single time I update the blend shapes. I only want to actually change the clothes when it needs to. So now you can see that the clothes are lining up with the mesh. So now I'll copy the high poly eyes from the MPFB Blender config folder. And I haven't really figured out the file structure yet, so I'll just rename this to high poly underscore eyes to differentiate, and you can see that there's several different eye colors available. So I'll just copy the light blue for now, although once I do the character creator menu, I will include all the different options. So then I'll open up Blender and I'll make a new human from scratch. Disable all of the shape keys. So it's just the basis. And then under rigging, add the Mixamo rig. So it has the skeleton weights, and then under apply assets, choose the eyes library and load the high poly eyes. And then I'll save this as, it doesn't really matter, so I'll save it as eyes.blend. And once it's done importing, double click on the blend file in the editor and select the mesh, enable save to file, and save it in the closegen high poly eyes, import mesh.resource, and re-import. So now I'll make a new resource, standard 3D material, and save it as material.tress, and drag the eye color ping into the texture and save that. So now I can add the eyes mesh to the make clothes scene, or the clothes demo, and rename this to eyes. I want to reset the transform. So then in the set blend shape value, I'll set the eyes blend shape value as well. And when I reset the skin from rest transforms, I want to reset the eyes skin. And I need to set the skeleton as well. So now when you can see that the character now has eyes, which is good. So the issue here is when you move the camera to below the character, you can see that the eyes disappear. And I did try changing the visibility and the visibility range, and I tried the cull modes and the material and the render priority, and so I'm not exactly sure how to get these to render, but I think it would be best to add the eyes into the base mesh anyway, so that the shape keys affect both, since the eyes are unanimous. There aren't any other eye variations other than the low poly, so you can decide which base mesh you'll want to use for the eyes. So, and I don't want to overwrite the shaded mesh, so I'll change the name of the save file, and then I'll rename the human resource. And now I'll make a new 3D scene to add the eyes to base mesh. And I'll add the shaded human and the eyes mesh. And I'll attach a new built-in script. Now on ready, I want to make a new array mesh equal to arrayMesh.new, and I'll set the new mesh blend shape mode to normalized. Then I want to loop over the child nodes using getChildren. And so for each one, I'll get the surface arrays from child.mesh.get.surface get arrays on surface 0, and I'll set the blend shape arrays equal to child mesh dot surface get blend shape arrays, and then I'll want to set the new mesh dot add surface from arrays using triangles, and I'll pass the surface arrays and blend shape arrays, and then I'll want to use the resource saver to save the new mesh as human.resource. So now if I run this, you can see that it did not generate the mesh, and that's because I forgot to add the shape keys. So before I loop over the children, I'll get the shape ID in human shaded dot get blend shape count, and then I'll get the shape name equal to human shaded dot mesh dot get blend shape name from shape ID, and then I'll set the new mesh add blend shape from the shape name. So now if I run that again, you can see that it has now generated the human. And it did not set the material, although you'll probably want to override that anyway. But I can go ahead and, so I want to now leap over the child ID and get child count, and then I'll get the child equals get child at child ID, and then after I add the surface from arrays, I'll set the material on the child ID, which will be the surface ID, and the child dot material. This might be child.mesh.get surface get material on 0. So if I run that again, it did not throw an error. And as you can see, so if I make a new scene and add the human resource, you can see that the eyes are now part of the mesh, and if I adjust the shape keys, the eyes move with it and they don't disappear whenever you are looking, whenever you change the perspective. So now if I open the closed demo and remove the eyes, you can see now if I replace the mesh with the new generated human mesh, now the eyes are working again. So it does work. It has more range, but when you zoom in, they still disappear, and with the animation, they don't really work at all. So I had to, in the human skin, just disable the transparency, and now the eyes are persistent. They do not disappear. So that's good. So you can add the teeth and tongue to the base mesh as well, and you could add like eyelashes and eyebrows, but there's different options for most of those. The tongue, there's only one option, so I can add that for sure. But for the teeth, I might want like vampire fangs or ogre tusks or whatever. So I don't necessarily want to add all of that to the base mesh, but the eyes are pretty universal. I can't think of any reason, unless you wanted to have them to not have eyes. If they like are missing an eye, I guess like you would want, but I don't really want that, so this is good for now. And you can still change the eye color on the model by setting the surface material override on the second material, so the 1 index, so you'll set the albedo, and under transparency set the depth draw to never, and now you can see the eyes. So you can change the texture that way, or you can use a shader to change the eye color, which is probably what I'll do, and then I only need one texture. So I'll figure that out at some point in the future, but next time I want to get started on the actual character creator menu that will be in game, instead of this in the editor. So I hope you enjoyed this episode. You can download all of this in the repository, which I'll link to in the description. And thank you for watching, and have a great day.